Kandard hours when Ambassador Veltar finally slammed his four-armed fist against the crystalline podium. The representative from the hegemony of Zephyria, his scales rippling with barely contained fury, fixed his compound eyes on the human delegation. Enough! Veltar's voice echoed through the vast chamber, his universal translator struggling to convey the depth of his exasperation. The Crimson Fleet has decimated 3 star systems in the past rotation. They show no mercy to civilians. No regard for surrender protocols. We need warriors, humans. We need your legendary soldiers that conquered your homeworld's countless conflicts. Dr. Sarah Chen, Earth's chief representative, remained seated calmly at the modest human table. Her graying hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and her worn cardigan seemed almost comically out of place among the elaborate armor and ceremonial garments of the other species. She adjusted her reading glasses and looked up from the datapad she'd been studying throughout Veltar's outburst. "With respect, Ambassador," Dr. Chen said, her voice carrying easily through the chamber despite its quiet tone. "I believe there's been a fundamental misunderstanding about what humanity can offer." A ripple of incredulous chatter swept through the assembly. The insectoid Kreeth delegation clicked their mandibles in what their species considered polite laughter. The gaseous ethereals pulsed with colors that indicated amusement. Even the stoic Titanians, beings of living stone, seemed to vibrate with skepticism. Misunderstanding? Veltar's head crest flared crimson. Your species fought wars for millennia. Your military history is legendary throughout the galaxy. The Battle of Stalingrad, the Normandy landings, the Siege of Vega Prime. Actually, Dr. Chen interrupted gently, the Siege of Vega Prime was a historical drama we broadcast. But you're right about our history of conflict. She stood, her movements unhurried. Which is precisely why we're not sending soldiers. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted in dozens of languages, their translation matrices overwhelmed by the cacophony. Veltar's scales had shifted to a deep purple that indicated both rage and desperation. "Then you condemn us all," he bellowed. "The Crimson Fleet will not stop with our territories. Earth itself will—" "We're sending teachers," Dr. Chen said, simply. The silence that followed was absolute. Commander Kreeves of the Zephyrian Defense Corps watched the human transport ships dock with their orbital station with barely concealed disgust. Dozens of vessels, each carrying not the seasoned warriors they desperately needed, but rather soft-looking beings, with cases full of books, educational materials, and what appeared to be toys. "This is madness," Kreeves muttered to his aide. "The Crimson Fleet will reach the outer colonies in 6 rotations, and Earth sends us the schoolteachers." Professor Michael Rodriguez was among the first to disembark. His backpack was stuffed with lesson plans, his tablet loaded with thousands of educational games, and his smile was infectious despite the grim circumstances. He approached Kreeves with the easy confidence of someone who had spent 30 years dealing with difficult audiences. "Commander Kreeves, I presume?" Professor Rodriguez extended his hand. "I'm Mike. I taught 7th grade back on Earth. I understand you. Have some young people who might benefit from some alternative perspectives." "Young people?" Kreeves's translator struggled with the concept. "You mean our offspring? Our hatchlings who are not yet of warrior age?" "Exactly." Professor Rodriguez's smile widened. "I'd love to meet them." The Crimson Fleet, notorious throughout the galaxy for their ruthless efficiency, had built their empire on a simple premise: conquest through superior firepower and absolute ruthlessness. Their ships were flying fortresses, their soldiers were bred for violence, and their tactics had never failed to break enemy resistance within rotations of engagement. Admiral Thraxus studied the tactical displays with satisfaction. The Zephyrian defenses were crumbling as predicted. Soon their homeworld would fall, and the fleet would claim another star system for their ever-expanding empire. "Admiral," his lieutenant reported, "we're detecting unusual energy signatures from the planet's surface." "Defensive installations?" "No, sir, the readings are inconsistent with any known weapons technology." The first sign that something had changed came during what should have been the final assault on Zephyria Prime. The Crimson Fleet's drop, ships descended toward the capital city. expecting to find the usual scene of chaos and terror that preceded planetary surrender. Instead, they found children. Thousands of young Zephyrians stood in the city's central plaza, their small scales glittering in the sunlight. They weren't cowering or fleeing. They were singing. The song was haunting, beautiful, and utterly alien to the Crimson Fleet's warriors. It spoke of home and family, of hope and resilience. It spoke of a future where differences were celebrated, rather than conquered. But it was what happened next that truly broke the fleet's resolve. The children began to approach the landed ships, not with weapons or anger, but with curiosity. They offered small gifts, handmade crafts, drawings, simple toys. They asked questions in halting galactic standard about the soldiers' homes, their families, their dreams. Private Morhan of the Crimson Fleet found himself face-to-face with a Zephyrian hatchling no larger than his forearm. The small being looked up at him with huge, innocent eyes and offered him a crudely carved wooden figure. "For you," the hatchling said in accented standard. "My teacher says everyone needs a friend." For the first time in his genetically enhanced life, Morhan hesitated. His weapon felt impossibly heavy in his hands. The training that had been burned into his neural pathways seemed suddenly wrong. The effect rippled through the ranks like a virus. Soldiers who had never questioned an order found themselves unable to advance. Officers discovered that their troops were laying down weapons, removing helmets, kneeling to speak with children at eye level. Admiral Thrax's received the reports, with disbelief, then rage, then a growing horror as he realized what was happening. The humans hadn't sent soldiers to fight the Crimson Fleet. They had sent teachers to remind them what they were fighting for. The war officially ended 3 rotations later, when Admiral Thrax's himself transported to the surface of Zephyria Prime. He found the human teachers conducting classes in the damaged city squares, Zephyrian children learning alongside young Crimson Fleet soldiers who had abandoned their posts. Professor Rodriguez looked up from a mixed group of students who were working together on an art project depicting their vision of peace. "Admiral," he said warmly, "would you like to join us? We're learning about the concept of home today." Thrax, leader of the most feared military force in the galaxy, sat down heavily among the children. For the first time in decades, he began to remember what his own home had looked like before he'd burned it in the name of conquest. The Galactic Council's follow-up session was considerably quieter than the emergency meeting that had preceded it. Ambassador Veltar approached Dr. Chen with something approaching reverence. "How?" he asked simply. "How did you know?" Dr. Chen smiled, the same patient expression she'd worn during countless parent-teacher conferences back on Earth. "Because we learned something very important during our own centuries of war, Ambassador. The most powerful weapon in any conflict isn't a gun or a bomb or a starship." She gestured toward the viewing screen, where images of the former Crimson Fleet colonies showed children of dozens of species playing together, learning together, building together. "It's hope for the future. And teachers? We're very good at teaching hope."